What's going on, guys? This is Garrett from RUNAMUCK MMA, and today, ladies and gentlemen, I am bringing to you a sort of new series I've been cooking in the books, atop the undercard, where I go over and discuss the upcoming preliminary cards on UFC events. We're doing it for this one because it's special. It's Halloween. I decided that now is as good a time as any to try this. So I'm just going to go over all the guys on the upcoming prelim card and pretty much just give you a quick little rundown just to highlight them and get them going. But I am going to give more detail on the guys that I think that I personally am more familiar with, and the ones that I think are going to be the special ones to look out for. And also, I can't get that much information on some of these guys because a lot of them are relatively unknowns going into this, much like Miles Johns and Kevin Natividad. Excuse me again if I mispronounce any of these names wrong, but Miles Johns and Kevin Natividad is going to the opener for the UFC event on ESPN this Saturday, Halloween. Again, like I said, Miles Johns is coming off of a loss to Mario Bautista, I believe earlier this year, if I'm not mistaken. And Kevin Natividad is actually going to be making his UFC debut going into this. So as you can see right here on the stats, that's what we've got. Even Kevin Natividad doesn't have a lot of stats uploaded onto the UFC's website just because this is his debut and not a whole lot is going on with him. And I've even seen some places say that he's actually 9-1 and not 9-2, whereas Miles Johns is in fact 10-1. And in fact, one of the victories for Miles Johns is actually over Adrian Yanez, who is a fighter, as you can see on screen, we will cover a little bit down the road. But I thought that was pretty notable, and so that should be a good fight to open with, a couple of bantamweights, so very exciting. Courtney Casey versus Priscila Cachoeira. Again, excuse me. Courtney Casey is unfortunately going to be coming into this with almost as many losses as she has victories, a very 50-50 record, and she is coming off of a loss back in June against Jillian Robertson, if I remember correctly, where she was subbed in the final round, round 3 of that bout. And there's been a lot of controversy with her. You know, how does a fighter who has almost as many losses as she has victories able to, move forward in this particular organization? But it just kind of goes to show that she is a tough character. She's a tough fighter. And she was able to take this fight on very, very short notice. Such short notice, in fact, that if you go to the Google webpage and you just type in UFC and you look up the fight night and you go to the preliminary card, it will actually not have Priscilla listed yet. Even though it has her record, it does not have her name listed, which I thought was pretty insane. But yeah, she's going up against Priscila Cachoeira, who is coming off of a victory against Shauna Dobson earlier this year, back in, I want to say, May or March. And Shauna Dobson being a person who is one of the more recent women to have one of the biggest upsets pretty much this year. So another great fight to be looking forward to, both pretty great grapplers. And then that leads us into Dustin Jacoby versus Justin Ledet. Dustin Jacoby being one of the main people, actually one of the first people on season 4 of the Contender Series to win his contract in the light heavyweight division, and actually really just barely got his UFC contract, and is now making his UFC debut this Saturday against Justin Ledet, who is coming off of a loss back in January of this year, and should be a pretty competitive bout between two gentlemen. It'll actually give us a chance to see whether or not Justin Jacoby was actually worthy of that contract that he earned. Even though he put up a good performance, he really gassed out toward the end of that fight. So we'll really be able to see if he's up against, if he's going to be good, I should say, up against someone like Ledet, who I think is still relative newcomer in the octagon, not just being 9-3, but I believe this is his third bout in the UFC. Then we go into Cole Williams versus Jason Witt. Unfortunately for me, I could not find a lot here going on with these guys. Jason Witt obviously has a lucrative record. Cole Williams may still be a little bit new. However, both men are coming off of a loss that I know of. Again, leave me any information about any of these fighters down in the comments below. I do really want to gas some of these people and really showcase what some of these people have to do. Just really get people talking about them more. But yeah, Jason Witt is going to be coming out here against Cole Williams. Cole Williams coming off of his loss. Jason Witt being obviously the more experienced of the two, is someone who I would highlight to win. However, Cole Williams being relatively a little bit younger should have the advantage here. We'll see what happens. And then we go into Sean Strickland versus Jack Marshman. Sean Strickland having one of the more interesting stories on this undercard. He was in a horrible motorcycle accident in 2018 that forced him to be out of commission pretty much for 2 whole years. He was actually on his way home from his gym when he was in said accident, and he was unconscious for several hours. He had to have surgery, and many of his doctors told him that his MMA career was actually in fact over and he was not going to be able to compete anymore. However, he had a very great recovery, and he was able to make it back, and he was able to now come back 2 years later and actually compete on this undercard against Jack the Hammer Marshman, who is another fighter, I believe, who's coming off of a loss, despite having a decent record in of his own right. Sean Strickland is coming out to box. He's coming out to do a stand-up game, and he's looking to KO Marshman, and we'll see if whether or not Marshman is going to let that happen against the newly recovered and refreshed Sean Strickland. Moving on to, I believe, I'm not mistaken, the co-main of this preliminary event, we have Adrian Yanez versus Aaron Phillips. Adrian Yanez, I'm sorry, I don't know why it says Aaron Phillips. It says Victor Rodriguez. Did we change? Uh-oh. Are we getting some live changes here? Let's see here. UFC. Because on the prelims, it still says Victor Rodriguez. Did Victor Rodriguez have to bow out? See if it says anything. If we click on Adrian Yanez. Aaron Phillips is likely the person who had to drop out of this bout. All right, get out of here. Just agree. All right, fresh off his win on Dana White's Contender Series, Adrian Yanez heads to the Apex to make his UFC debut. He was originally scheduled to fight Aaron Phillips, but he had to pull out due to injury. Yanez is hoping to keep his streak going after knocking out Brady Huang to make it 4 on the bounce since losing a split decision to Miles Johns back in November of 2018. We talked about Johns earlier, who's also on this card. There you go. He takes on another UFC debutant who's also on a 4-fight win streak. Victor Rodriguez had a couple of setbacks in 2014, getting knocked out and submitted, but now he is on a roll, a violent roll. He's coming off 4 straight knockouts, including a 2nd-round finish over Jared Mazurek for the Alaska Fighting Champion. So that's going to be good for that. So I'm glad we actually got to be able to pull that up. So it's not Aaron Phillips. The UFC website is notorious for not really updating or doing a whole lot of these minuscule things like this, even though we're 2 days. I'm recording this 2 days before the fight actually takes place. You'd think that they would have updated that, but that's what happens. It's whatever. So Victor Rodriguez is actually going to be the person who Adrian Yanez is going up again. Adrian Yanez being another person who was on the season 4 of the Contender Series. We have an episode about that. I would love to put that in the description of this video if you want to go check that out, or just wait until the end of this video and check out the playlist that video is in. So that being said, really looking forward to that. Adrian Yanez is very, very talented, and I don't know much about Victor Rodriguez, but he is also a debutant in this matchup. And then finally, we are finishing out the night with Alexander Hernandez versus Chris Grutzemacher. Excuse me again. I feel like that's the toughest name for me to pronounce. this video. But Alexander Hernandez, I believe, needs no introduction. He was actually on the up and up, having great KO wins over the likes of Beneil Dariush, and unfortunately ran into the Cowboy, Donald Cerrone, on his way up the ladder. When he entered the top 15, Donald Cerrone knocked his ass back down. He had a very close, I believe, split decision win over Francisco Trinaldo, and then unfortunately in his most recent fight, lost to Drew Dober. And there have been a lot of things going on with Alexander Hernandez since that loss, where he lost to Dober, going as far, for himself to think that he wasn't cut out for MMA anymore. And luckily his coaches talked him out of that mindset, and he was able to actually make a huge move from San Antonio, Texas to Colorado, and work with a new team and new coaches and all that jazz, and really work on creating a new version of himself so that he could come back and really just reinvigorate his career and get out of this 1-2 skid that he's in, up against Chris Grutzemacher, Chris, who's actually another fighter who's been out of the UFC game since 2018, usually due to injuries and other things of the sort. Most importantly, a ACL tear that was putting him out of the business. However, I believe he is still he's coming off a victory against Joe Lozon, who's a pretty good fighter to have a victory off of. However, he did have a couple of losses prior to that. So it's really a matchup between a fighter who's looking to make a comeback from some losses and a comeback from a fighter who's looking to make a comeback from an absence, a 2-year absence. So really that's going to be very interesting to see. Is the new coach and team going to be good for Alexander Hernandez? Are we going to see a lot of improvement? Are we going to see Alexander Hernandez really break free of that plateau that he was in and move forward? Or are we going to see Chris Grutzemacher showcase that 2 years layoff did not hinder him at all, and he himself made a speedy recovery, much like Sean Strickland, and was able to pull out a victory Saturday night? So that's going to be it for this video, you guys. Just let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Which fighters are you excited for this upcoming Saturday? And yeah, if you have any ideas on the main card, even just let me know in the comments below. And also just give any awesome and cool information about any of these fighters, because that's the idea behind this series. We're going to see how this episode does, and we'll maybe do 1 or 2 more after this, just to really see if it's worth doing or not. So thank you guys again, and I will see you guys later. Make sure you have a good night. Peace.